West Urgent Care, and he'll be joining us in hour number 2. But as he does every Tuesday, of course, I'm talking about attorney Thomas Moskal, the former DA here in Clark County. He was Clark County's top DUI prosecutor, now defending those that get DUIs. Mr. Moskal, looking sharp as always. How's it going, my friend?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, looking sharp. You come from court today. What's doing today?
Yeah, I have court before and I have court after.
Yeah.
I got a DUI case I got to go down to the city court for.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it Marshawn Lynch?
It's not Marshawn
okay.
Lynch. It's
I was
not.
just checking. Just checking. Maybe we can get Marshawn on the line a little bit later on today. I don't know. We'll work on that one, but
see if we can get another confession out.
Yeah, maybe we can get Marshawn to confess on something today. Justin, maybe you can work on that for us. But hey, here's what I want to start with. I want to talk to you about Kyle Rittenhouse a little bit, but big story coming out of Arkansas, small city there in Arkansas, where you have 3 police officers that are seen on a video beating someone that's already on the ground. The first thing I thought about was Rodney King. Last time I saw something like this, and it looks really bad. This is somebody who's white. Rodney King was obviously black, and there were racial connotations to that. We know that. But when I saw this video, that's the first thing that I thought of. So I want to explain this to you, but I thought what better person to explain it better than me would be CNN's Omar Jimenez, kind of breaking down this story. Here's Omar from CNN on the story.
3 Arkansas law enforcement officers have been removed from duty after this video showing them hitting a man outside a store in Mulberry, Arkansas, was posted to social media. The officers are seen punching and kneeing the suspect repeatedly and later arresting him. In the video, a woman not seen can be heard screaming to stop beating him, telling the officers he needs his medicine. An officer points and yells at her to back up. The person who posted the video says her sister witnessed the altercation. The 2 Crawford County deputies were suspended and the Mulberry police officer placed on administrative leave while the incident is investigated. Police say the man in the video is 27-year-old Randall Worcester of Goose Creek, South Carolina. They accuse him of threatening and spitting on a gas station attendant in a nearby town. The clerk then called the police. Worcester then rode a bike to the County Express convenience store in Mulberry, where he was arrested outside the store. One witness tells CNN affiliate KHBS it looked like the man got up to run away to avoid arrests, but the sheriff claims he got up to attack an officer.
All right, Thomas. So as I said, when you watch this video, it's tough to watch.
Well, yeah, the commentary doesn't do any justice for the video.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the video, there's no question it's excessive, right? No matter what happened beforehand.
He's already on the ground.
At the point the video starts, and I'm not going to say, you see the knees coming in from the bottom officer, and the middle officer seems just to be holding him, but it's the one that's punching him in the head, slamming the guy's head into the ground. I'm a little speechless watching it.
I was too. I first thought about George Floyd. I then thought about Rodney King. Now, this obviously isn't a racial thing. These are 3 white officers and a white. I'm going to call him a victim. Now, let's just say worst case scenario for this guy that was beaten. Worst case scenario beforehand. He did spit on somebody. We don't even know if that's true. He did spit on somebody. He threatened to hurt somebody. He did attack a police officer. Does that still justify what you saw in the video?
Well, the whole point is, I guess they're trying to conduct an arrest on him.
Right.
And the story that's coming out, at least, is that he pushed one of the officers when they were trying to talk to him. And that's when everything kind of ensued. What I say is this, this is I'm just going to surmise based on what I'm watching. And this is a lot of speculation going on, that it seems like a guy who's got some mental health issues, that he is getting irate in one of these stores. He's threatening a clerk. We see that kind of stuff all the time. Okay. But it's not this serious offense that's going on where a police show up and they're on high alert. There's a shooting going on, something like that. And so the whole point is to now arrest this guy. He's getting belligerent, get him into custody. But at the point the video starts, I don't know if you actually heard the audio on that video.
I have.
Where the person who's shooting, there's a woman there going, man, you don't have to beat the out of him. Right. And that's what the onlookers were. So that's someone who was actually right on the scene watching everything that was going down, was like, whatever he did wrong did not necessitate this. And at the point when the officer slamming the guy's head, or even just pushing his head down into the pavement right there, it was very unnecessary.
I find it interesting that with some of these police officers and some of these law enforcement agencies, when they're absolutely 100% justified, they release body camera footage immediately. We're hearing two different stories here. And by the way, both of these stories still, in my opinion and in your opinion, obviously don't justify what these officers did in beating this guy when he was on the ground. However, officers are claiming in the police report that this guy went after them and started the physical altercation first. But the witness that was on the scene that recorded the video, two witnesses are now claiming that he was trying to get away from the officers. He was trying to, get away from them because he didn't want to be arrested. He didn't dart towards them. He went away from them. So if that was the case and they were lying, which I don't know why these witnesses would lie, and if the officers are telling the truth, where's the evidence? Isn't there dash cam footage? Isn't there body camera footage? They haven't released any of those, which leads me to believe that the officers are lying. Now, I could be wrong on that, but it leads me to believe the officers are lying. They said in the press conference that they believe that he went at the officers. Well, if that's true, then show us the evidence of that. They have not done that. So I have major issues with what these police officers have said. I have major issues with what happened when this guy was on the ground. Clearly, by that time, they know he doesn't have a weapon on him or he wasn't reaching for a weapon. They have no reason to use deadly force. When you grab somebody's head and you hit it against the pavement and you're constantly punching that individual in the head, that's deadly force. You can die from that. People have died from that kind of stuff. That's deadly force. Nothing that we've seen would justify deadly force there.
This is what I mean is, assuming the officers are telling the truth that they were attacked by him, at the point where we're watching the video, what they're doing is not proportional to what they need to, what the force that they need to use. And it's the one officer who is, like you said, he's rabbit punching the back of the head and slamming the head into the ground. It was above and beyond, even if the guy's tensing up, because when you're watching it, how could a person not tense up at that point and even try to struggle a little bit with their hands as they're being beaten like that? And so it's not going to shake out well for those officers at all. I mean, thankfully, this isn't a suspect that died in custody or anything like that. But no matter what happened leading up to the arrest, trained officers, it's incumbent upon them to be able to be reasonable with the force that they're exercising. And I don't think that there is body camera footage in this case. I don't think they're withholding it. I don't think there is body camera footage. But that goes to show that scientific studies have been done, and this is common sense. When officers are wearing body cam nowadays, and in Vegas, they can turn it off and on, but there's a movement towards having it continuously running, is that officers are being more compliant with what they need to be doing on the streets. Not only that, but the suspects themselves, when they know an officer shows up and is informed the body camera is right there, suspects themselves tend to act better too.
Yeah. Here's my biggest issue, and I'm going to make this a bigger issue when it comes to law enforcement, trust of law enforcement, and everyday citizens, Thomas. And you can tell me whether you agree with me or not. Problem I have, and this is a perfect example, if there are not innocent bystanders that are recording this, we're not talking about this. Nobody knows what happened. Why? Because the officers will lie and they'll say that he attacked them and they were just defending themselves, trying to arrest him. This wouldn't be on the news. Those officers, I guarantee you, would be on the streets today. The only reason why they're suspended, the only reason, is not because of them doing what they did. It's because innocent bystanders were recording it. And I go back to George Floyd. If people weren't videoing what happened to George Floyd, not only would those officers not be charged with anything, but they would still be police officers. And I hate to quote Will Smith, but I think I'm going to quote him now. And don't worry, it has nothing to do with him being slapped or slapping somebody. Now, he was talking about racism. I think it's more of a general statement. He said, listen, it's not like there's more police brutality when it comes to racism in the country today. It's that people are finally recording it. And he's right. So my question is, what we just saw in Arkansas, how many times is this stuff happening all over the country? How often is this happening all over the country when we don't hear about it? That's what bothers me. That's what bothers me a lot, Thomas. And I feel like I have some solutions. I think body cameras should be mandatory 24/7. I don't care where you're working. I think that's number one. I think it should be a felony if you turn it off. That's number two. I don't know if we have the capabilities of doing this online or not, but I believe every officer with their badge number should be put on their precinct's website, and their body camera footage should be able to stream it 24/7. Now, I know what you're saying. You're not going to find internet in some parts of the country, and that's going to be very expensive.
No, that's not what I was going to say. You couldn't have a live feed going on that.
Why?
Well, you're compromising their ability to go ahead and secure the community. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
You'd be able to have a live feed and know where every single officer on duty is at in the jurisdiction at that point. I mean, that lends itself to criminal activity being able to go and cops not being able to do their job to secure the community. So not a live feed. And you also have a lot of privacy issues that go along with that. So there's a need for oversight, but there's also a need for our police agencies to have some kind of privacy when they're conducting their affairs. If you want everybody to trust the police, this is where it comes to access to body cam after the fact.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what we're seeing in some of these jurisdictions. They try to fight even ever releasing this to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an area of law that's still forming. Freedom of Information Act requests. Freedom of Information Act is a relatively new thing in our country that people can actually access these public records and these body camera things. And so they're trying to make exceptions to it in certain situations. And these exceptions have good justifications. But we're also seeing that some of these exceptions are being used, like down in Texas with Uvalde, that they're throwing everything at the wall not to release things when they think it might look bad on them. And so there's a balance to it. So no, I don't agree with live streaming every officer's body camera.
Well, listen, you make some good points. All I'm simply saying is, how do you get communities and how do you get everyday citizens to have trust in law enforcement?
Maybe stream it with a time lag. Maybe next day you can see that officer's body cam.
Fine. No problem. I'm just saying, what could rectify? Now, listen, the only cops that are not going to want this are the bad ones. I would like to think that the overwhelming majority of police officers are good people.
Well, let me just man to man. Okay, when we're out in our regular lives and our private lives, we're on the radio. We know we're being recorded right here.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things that we might joke around about or banter around about that we're not going to do on the air that we would do when we're off the air.
But here's the difference. We don't have guns. We don't have that kind of power.
Well, no. Now, what I'm saying is this. All right. You have, let's say you have two cops that are partners. They drive around all day.
Yep.
I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of things that they are just going to talk about in the course of business. Not even in business, just personal things. And what you're now demanding is in someone's work life, to where it's like, well, you better basically not have any of those moments and watch everything that you say, which is true. But if you see, my point being is carrying it to a line where it's like, man, you have to watch every single thing you say, especially in this culture that we're living in today, and to have that as a requirement of your job.
Well, it happened a few weeks ago. The cop, the female police officer that was in her police car, chasing down somebody black using the N-word. She lost her job because of that. I have absolutely no problem with that. While I understand there are levels, okay?
Right.
If you make a snarky comment about your boss in jest, I don't think you should be fired for that. But if you're using the N-word, yes, I think you should be fired. I get what you're saying. Listen, if a guy
is an off-color joke,
listen, if
these
a guy,
are the kinds of things
example,
will get you fired.
If a guy is in a squad car with his partner and he's married and he's talking about how he had sex with another partner the night before, that's a personal thing. That should only affect his personal life. It shouldn't affect his job. So I get what you're saying, but you know what? This will also train police officers to be more professional and to not talk about stuff like that, because quite frankly, you're getting paid. I'm not getting paid by tax dollar money. This is a public job. You know about this. They're getting paid by tax dollars.
Well, I do know about it. And so at the prosecutor's office, you could think, when you're dealing in that world, in order to live in that world of law enforcement and dealing with crime all the time, you have to get a little desensitized to it. You have to get a little detached to it. You have to get a little jaded. And along with that comes this little bit of dark humor in the stuff that you're seeing every day, because it's so tragic.
Understand.
And sometimes you're joking around about things with other people that are in the same line of business as you, that a normal person who doesn't have to see this on a daily basis would go, my God, how can you be laughing about a joke in a situation like this? And it's like, well, listen, we live in this 24/7 for years and years and years. If we don't joke and have some levity about things that a normal person
there's a level though,
funny,
but I agree.
There's a level, but what I'm saying is, think about the cancel culture we live in. to be subjecting, what you would be doing is expecting them to basically say, hey, you're in a public job. You better watch every single thing you say. Sit in silence if you have to for these 8 hours when you're patrolling around.
I think it's one thing to have a public job. It's another thing to be a police officer. I think it's the highest level. And while I completely understand what you're saying, I want them to be held at that high level. But you know why? Because they have all the power. They have the gun. They have the handcuffs. They have the squad car. And there's a lot of mistrust between society right now and law enforcement. And by the way,
wholeheartedly,
I am pro-police. You're not talking to someone that would ever say defund the police. You're not talking to someone that would ever say most police officers are racist, because I don't believe that. But I am simply saying, if you really want to fix this problem overnight and get the bad cops out of there or get them in trouble, mandatory recordings of them 24/7. I'm sorry, that I shouldn't say 24/7, on their shift.
On their shift. And that is where the movement's going, you know. But just because they're being recorded right now, let's say, I think Colorado, it's continuous recording. They don't get the ability to turn off and on.
Which I agree with.
In Colorado, it doesn't mean that it's publicly available where everybody who wants to access a body cam can do that. And there's some real security issues. I mean, when you have law enforcement officers, there's a reason why their addresses are not publicly available. There's reasons for all of that. And because they can be targets and they are subjecting their lives on the line sometimes. So the continuous recording, the movement's going there. I think in this small town in Arkansas that we're dealing with, I don't even think they're at the point where they even have body cams for their officer. They haven't even achieved that level.
Let's talk about that. If you're just joining us, he is Thomas Moskal. He's the former DA here at Clark County.
In Clark County, Nevada Highway Patrol just got their body cams like maybe 2 years ago.
So everything's new. I understand that. Let's talk about Randall Worcester. He's the man from South Carolina who allegedly spat at a worker and threatened to cut off their face. I think we all could probably agree that if that's true, you're right. He probably has some mental problems. He's probably disturbed. Here's the bigger issue. While I don't condone any of that behavior, if he did it, if you spit on somebody, for the most part, that's not deadly force, right? You're not committing an armed robbery. He wasn't doing anything along that nature. Hey, spitting on someone is a crime, right? No question about it, especially this day and age with COVID and everything else. From what I can see and from the evidence that police have not brought forward, I don't see anything that would suggest that he was attacking police officers. Sorry, I'm not buying that. Is it possible that he spit at a police officer? Is it possible that he was saying some very bad words? Very possible. None of that behavior by those police officers.
But I go further. I go, just assume that he lunged and pushed one of the cops.
Right. That's not deadly force.
It's 3-on-1.
Right.
You got him on the ground at a certain point.
Right.
This whole idea of the adrenaline running and these things, yes, that's true, but you have to be able to exercise restraint. And I'm sorry. Holding their face to the pavement, that was one thing, but it was the picking up and slamming the head down. No, everyone watching that video. I mean, I saw the former police chief from Boston. He was watching that video. He was commenting. He just said, look, no question. This is excessive. This is not what you're trained to do.
And the governor, by the way, agrees. The governor held a press conference. He held one yesterday. He held one today. And he agrees as well. This is indefensible. So let me ask you this, Thomas. What do you think is going to happen here with these three officers? What do you think is going to happen to Randall Worcester? I would imagine there's probably going to be a big payout here. What do you think is going to be the end result in this case?
Well, the payout is going to depend on how bad his injuries were. And we don't know that, but just from me watching the video, I don't think he got injured to that point where he's going to have this huge payday at the end of this. There will be what we call a 1983 action where you enforce your civil rights, and that was excessive force that wasn't necessary there. But definitely what's going to happen with these police officers, I don't see criminal charges coming out of this case against them. The DA's office down there is going to investigate, but I see them. I mean, look, at least the one who was slamming the head down, I think the guy in the middle, I didn't really see him doing anything wrong. The guy throwing the knees, he could have been justified in that if there were some kicking and some things, and he even stopped it a second. But it's the one guy who was up near the head. I mean, it was up above and beyond, and I think he was the actual police officer as opposed to the other guys were sheriff's deputies. He's going to lose his job.
What if this guy died, which he didn't?
Well,
then there would be criminal charges, no?
It depends. It depends. You know, I mean, everything's discretionary when it comes to prosecution. The prosecutors could get a case and they will look at the evidence and see if they want to proceed on it. Like I said, every DA's office, every prosecutor's office is a political animal at the end of the day. So now that this is in the media, and this is to your point, now that it's in the media, maybe the DA's office down there looks at it and says, we're going to actually pursue some charges. I know here locally, we've had police officers who have allegedly stepped out of line. And so in this climate, everyone's looking for the prosecutors to prosecute police officers. And so maybe the prosecutor's office will submit it to a grand jury and see if the grand jury wants to indict the guys. And if they don't, well, then it's like, hey, we tried.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the political nature of it. So, yeah. And if a person dies and it's in the media, a much higher chance that this is going to be taken to a prosecution level of criminal charges.
I want to ask you about this. And I'm not saying this guy attacked a police officer, but hypothetically speaking, can a police officer use deadly force if he's being physically assaulted by someone? I would venture to say yes, because the officer has deadly weapons on him. The officer has a gun, could easily get that gun, the perpetrator. So when somebody is physically assaulting a police officer, can't an officer use deadly force?
No, it takes more than just physically assaulting. I mean, they're under the same standard anybody else is. They have to feel like they are actually in a reasonable fear of their own life or great bodily harm, right? So now if they're being physically assaulted by somebody that, let's be honest, this officer, let's say he's 230-pound, big guy, 6'5", got his weapons on him, and some 100-pound female is starting to scratch at him and claw at him. No, he's not going to take his gun out and blow her brains out. You're definitely getting prosecuted for that. But it's always a fact-by-fact basis. And it's not so easy to get those guns out of those holsters, man. We actually have seen video. I prosecuted a case one time where the suspect had a female officer and the defendant was a big guy and was beating her. And he was trying to get that gun out, and he was lifting her whole body off the ground by the pistol grip of the gun. Because this holster, you have to do there's a certain technique to get the gun out of the holster. There's safety mechanisms.
Right.
But that was a scary video to watch. That was actually on video. You were kind of watching this guy try to get this officer's gun.
See, because here's my thinking on this, and you tell me where I'm wrong here. If I'm a police officer, I have my taser on me. I have my gun on me. If somebody is physically assaulting me and I'm in fear that I could, be knocked out unconscious, I'm going to take my gun out, because I'm in fear that, hey, if this guy knocks me out, I could hit the pavement and die. We know that people can die based on just a simple punch. I don't know if this guy is going to grab my gun or grab my taser.
This is the typical situation you're going to see. So in a situation like what we're seeing in Arkansas,
yeah.
All right, 3 officers approach this guy. He's mentally unstable. He's starting to act like he's a threat. Officers are supposed to get their non-lethal weapons out, right? So maybe one officer will sit in the cut and get his lethal weapon out, and the other 2 will go non-lethal.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, try to take him down with the beanbag shotgun or the taser or something. And one officer will sit there with a lethal weapon. They usually try everything they can do command-wise, and even when they're trained to create distance. So if you're being charged, I'm going to backpedal away from you as I have my firearm on you, still trying to give you commands. And it's not until the very last second. But if a suspect is charging at you as you're armed, especially if they're carrying some kind of weapon like a knife, you're going to go deadly force right then. But they try to wait, at least in Vegas, they try to wait to the last possible second before doing it. But some of these mentally unstable people, they come at you.
Not to get into this George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin situation, because I feel like George Zimmerman is a piece of human garbage. And there's no question that Trayvon Martin would still be alive today if Zimmerman didn't get out of his car. With that being said, the one portion of this story where I defended George Zimmerman was the moment where he took out the gun and shot Trayvon Martin. And I said that is because Trayvon Martin is on top of him, pushing his head against the ground and punching him. I'd be in fear of my life as well. I don't condone anything George Zimmerman did that day. In fact, I wish George Zimmerman was in jail. With that being said, in that moment, I believe the jury made the right decision, because I believe in that moment he was in fear of his life. And you heard him screaming, help, help, help. I'd be pretty scared too. Now, I would never get myself in that situation that George Zimmerman did in racially profiling someone and pretending like you're law enforcement and following Trayvon Martin, which he should have never done. That's another story, and I believe he should have been charged with other crimes. But it wasn't murder. And the reason why it wasn't murder is because he was in fear of his life. And I do feel like in a situation where a police officer is in fear of their life, if their head's being banged against pavement and they're getting punched in the face, I do believe that officer should be allowed to take out his gun and use deadly force. Now, I know that's different than this case, what I'm describing, but yeah, there are circumstances where I'm sure you would agree.
The circumstances change too. When you're in a self-defense situation, the law says you're not allowed to create the situation that gave you the need to use self-defense, right?
Right.
But you are allowed, let's say you and we get into an altercation, and we're going to go fisticuffs.
Mhm.
Okay. So both of us are not going deadly force. I instigated it on you. And then you escalate. You go for a knife or a gun. At that point, I can use deadly force, right?
Yep.
But I can't get into a non-deadly force confrontation with you, me being the instigator, and then me escalating it to deadly force before you do.
Right.
So there's levels to that game, and that makes common sense when you think about it. Like, you don't want people going around starting fights so they can go deadly force on somebody. But in a real-time situation, it's a little bit harder to gauge. And that was really the crux of the case with Zimmerman.
Yeah.
It was like, did you kind of create this situation, though?
He did.
You know,
He
even
did.
though right at the end,
The problem is the prosecutors went for too much. They went for too much. I think if they went for manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, if they didn't try to get him on murder, because I believe they were pressured to do so.
Well, that's what I say.
Yeah.
DA's office, political animal.
Mhm.
If they cut a deal,
Yep,
then they're looked at like, oh, I can't believe you cut a deal. If they go for the full prosecution and they lose, similar like Rittenhouse, and you lose, come out smelling like a rose. Like, what else could we do? We went as hard as we could on him, and the jury.
Yeah, I don't like that. I think Zimmerman should have gotten 5 to 10. I really do. And I think getting him on murder charges, I knew he wasn't going to be charged with murder because it wasn't murder. Involuntary manslaughter, whatever his behavior leading up to that point.
But self-defense is going to exculpate him off of all those crimes.
Absolutely. And I do believe in the end, it was self-defense. Do I blame Trayvon Martin for being scared? No. Do I blame Trayvon Martin for starting a physical altercation? No. Where he was brought up, if somebody is threatening you, you take action. He was a young kid. I don't blame Trayvon Martin at all. Was he a perfect kid? No. Academic to that situation. I feel for his family. A horrible situation. He didn't deserve to die. And a very sad situation. George Zimmerman is a piece of human garbage. He was seen in some places signing autographs. Really, people wanted his autograph for what he did. I'm shocked that the
country's
could make a joke and say I'm shocked that the Republican National Convention won't want somebody like George Zimmerman speaking. But anyway, I would never make a statement like that.
In the U.S., in the United States, we do have the right to defend ourselves. It's ingrained in the law to the point where it's not that the jury said, oh, George Zimmerman proved that he had the right to self-defense. That's not how our law operates. In the United States of America, the prosecutors, once there's just a little bit of evidence that it could be self-defense, now it's on the prosecutors to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not self-defense. So that's the difference. And we talked about that with the Rittenhouse case when we were talking about it while the case was going on. I was telling you, it's not about him proving it was self-defense. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not. And that's a tough thing to prove in a lot of situations.
We're going to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse because he's back in the news for the wrong reasons again. But if we're going to talk briefly about that case, I always said it wasn't murder, and I do believe it was self-defense. But here's why I still believe he should have been convicted of a crime. A week prior, he was seen in a video as people were stealing things outside of a drugstore. He was seen saying, I wish I had an AR-15 so I could shoot them. I'm paraphrasing here. He made a statement like that. It was a frame of mind that he was in not 10 years before. This isn't somebody who made that statement at 18 and then 30 years later. That would be different.
But Brian, even if he had that mindset, he had plenty of opportunity in Kenosha to unleash that firearm. He had plenty of opportunity in the moment that it went down, and he didn't do it. He didn't shoot the guy that was chasing him till the last second, and he was running for his life down there when those people were attacking him. And I knew 1,000% that he was going to get a not guilty at the end of that when I watched that video. And so you can bring in his mindset from a week before, but let me analogize it to this. Hey, Brian, if I get attacked by a gang of people, I'm going to defend myself. How does that make my claim to self-defense a week later when I get attacked by a bunch of people? No, but I'm just making an analogy.
But I understand, but he made statements that were far worse than what you just made. He saw people shoplifting a beer, okay? And he said, I wish I had my AR-15 so I could kill them. What you're talking about is justified based on the law. What he was talking about is not justified. That would have been murder.
He said those words, but you're saying now use those words he said against him when we have video evidence showing that he did not do what his words from a week before were saying.
Understood. The actual shooting, what he did, was self-defense. Now, I have plenty of issues in this case. The first guy he shot, 100% self-defense. That guy attacked him. But then you have a situation where he's holding his AR-15, and there's a bunch of people that didn't see that first shooting, but they hear there's an active shooter. I believe those next two people he shot, one of them who he killed, they thought he was an active shooter. They didn't see the first shooting.
I'm going to tell you this, but whatever they thought, they were in the wrong. They thought that he's an active shooter, so they started gang attacking him. But that's not what was going on. And so I'm gonna tell you this: Rittenhouse case. If I was at that prosecutor's office, I'm a former prosecutor. My bosses tell me I got to prosecute that case to the fullest. I might have left the job at that point, because I'm looking at this going, I've never seen such a clear-cut case of this being an unprovable murder charge, where I actually believe when I'm watching the video that it's self-defense. As a prosecutor, I always was ethically bound to say, I'm never going after somebody I don't think is good for it. I don't care what my marching orders are.
I understand what you're saying. And by the way, when you were on my prior show and you said this, and I agreed with you, and you were right, and I was right. I didn't think he was going to get convicted. However, all I'm talking about are the mistakes that Kyle Rittenhouse made, the stupidity. He should have never been there. He should have never certainly been there with a gun. We know that he didn't know anybody personally that owned businesses there. He was trying to be a vigilante, a wannabe cop. I don't think he's a very intelligent person.
And I said this before on your show. I said, agree. But you know what? There's no crime against being stupid. Even stupid people have the right to defend themselves when the situation calls for it.
Understood. But I'm going to take it a step further again. We can't look at these people like Kyle Rittenhouse and praise them or call them heroes or have them speak at Republican events. Why? Because then you're saying, and by the way, there are people in this country that believe this. No problem. If you're 18 years old and you see a volatile protest, I don't care what it is. It could be a white supremacist protest, a Black Lives Matter protest, whatever. You're saying, yeah, if you're 18, go bring your AR-15s and go dress in camouflage. It is dangerous to this country. And that is my problem with people that are looking up to this guy as some sort of hero. And we're going to talk about that next. Now, that has nothing to do with what we just spoke about, the legalities of the case, but it's about the goodness of the country and what's right and what's wrong. You can hold up a sign on a public sidewalk that says, I hate white people or I hate black people. Guess what? It's not against the law, but it's bad for the country. And it can raise to the level of violence if people are doing things like that. There are things we can do in this country that are legally not against the law.
But, you know, we talk about this a lot, too. And we talked about it with Uvalde, and we talked about it with other situations.
Right.
Right now, people in the country feel like they can't depend on law enforcement to go ahead and protect their property and their persons.
That can
and
never, but that
now,
can
I'm
never,
not saying Rittenhouse was not stupid for going up there. I'm saying the sentiment in the country has a distrust of law enforcement. There's also a distrust of law enforcement's ability to even protect us and our families at this point, in our property. And so that's why the Kenosha thing popped off the way it did. Is they were like, "Oh, we got to go protect our property." And so, you know, that can we get to a point where we can depend on government to do what it's supposed to do, which is to maintain the peace and order?
In a perfect world, yes, but I don't think that should, because people don't trust law enforcement, that shouldn't be a reason for an 18-year-old with like little to no training to show up on the AR-15 dressed up in camouflage. You're asking for trouble. Jorge Gomez, I defend him and his family, but what he did that day was stupid here in Las Vegas because he showed up with an AR-15. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. He was anti-police. He was there because he was pro-Black Lives Matter, anti-police, and now he's dead. And yes, I have problems with that case, and I think an officer committed murder. But Jorge should not have been there with a gun to begin with. Did he deserve to be shot and killed? Absolutely not. But sometimes stupid people do stupid things, and it could cost their life or somebody else's life. Kyle Rittenhouse is lucky that he's alive right now, quite frankly. I'm shocked that nobody shot and killed him. With that being said, 2 people were killed. Regardless of self-defense or not, he should have never been there to begin with. Doesn't mean he broke the law, but he should never have been there to begin with.
And again, I'm telling you it was self-defense from a prosecutor's perspective looking at the video, but the jury's verdict is not that he was in self-defense. They didn't exonerate him. They said the prosecution has not proved beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not self-defense.
Understood.
And there's a little bit of it. There's a difference there, you know?
Understood.
He wasn't exonerated.
And I think terrible judge on that case, playing as Lee Greenwood. And I listen, I agree with you. This was not murder. This was self-defense. I think the jury came to the correct conclusion. I'm not saying otherwise. What I am saying, though, is that people looking up to Kyle Rittenhouse as some sort of hero, which is a stupid punk kid. To me, he's no better or worse than George Zimmerman. But